Speaking of Portland, I do want to bring in senior NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski because we had some breaking news out of Portland this morning. And as usual, it sent some shockwaves through our newsroom today in a development with Damian Lillard and the situation in Portland. And I want to quote you here, Woj, because this stood out to me as the crux of your reporting. You said that his desire for an extension into his advanced NBA years has turned into a battle for the franchise's future. Can you take us inside that battle in Portland?
Yeah, Malika, essentially, Damian Lillard will be eligible for a 2-year, $107 million max extension next summer. Now, that would take him to his 36th birthday under contract in Portland. He wants that extension. He has made it clear to the organization, and there's uncertainty whether the organization will want to commit to him on that, because right now he's a very tradable asset. But all of a sudden, Dame Lillard in his mid-30s, as potentially the highest paid player in the league, $55 million in 2026. Well, that's a very different deal to try to trade. And essentially a new general manager in Portland, whomever would come in to replace Neil O'Shea. You talk to executives around the league, and many of them have one singular question for this Portland ownership group, and that's, do I have the ability to move Dame Lillard if I came into that job, or are you guys committed ultimately to doing that extension and trying to rebuild another team around him at 31 years old? This is a team that's been in the playoffs 8 straight years, but certainly that kind of a player, as great as Dame Lillard has been and is, you usually see a steep decline, and it is hard in a small market to build a roster around a player at that age with that kind of money committed.
Well, and you mentioned it, Woj, that Portland parted ways with Neil O'Shea last Friday, and that means that the number one priority for their new GM, right, is weighing this extending or trading Lillard. So what's step one look like in that process?
Well, ultimately, this is an ownership decision, and Jody Allen, who took over the team essentially in a trust. She oversees the Blazers as a trust from her late brother, Paul Allen, and it's ultimately going to be her decision on, especially any personal matter of this magnitude. And, she doesn't have the history with Dame Lillard that perhaps her brother did. Paul Allen, who was there when Neil O'Shea drafted him, they've had a great deal of success with him. But I think now as they go out into the marketplace and talk to candidates about rebuilding this Blazers franchise, certainly there's a sense around the league and among those who might be interested in the job that the best asset they have to start a rebuild is Damian Lillard. And, certainly there's some other players in CJ McCollum, Yusuf Nurkic, that if you decided to essentially liquidate this roster, you'd start your rebuild. Could they get enough back in trades for everybody else and then give Dame that max extension next summer? It seems like a harder road to really building a contender, but that's what Dame Lillard wants, and that's what his reps want. And so I think there's a moment of truth coming here in Portland, really next summer in July, when he's eligible for that $107 million 2-year extension. That would certainly put him under contract to his 36th birthday.
Well, and this is fascinating reporting from you on ESPN Plus. You mentioned, and you alluded to it just there, that the teams that are interested in Dame are waiting for him to make an official trade request before calling Portland. Why is that?
Well, that was certainly the case, Malika, in the summer when teams were unclear what his intentions were. It's really a leverage play that you give up some leverage when you make that call. Player hasn't asked out yet. That they know the Blazers lose some leverage once a player asks out. Any team loses some leverage once a player wants out. Philadelphia, I'm told, is really the only team that called with an offer for Damian Lillard. And Portland, under Neil O'Shea, certainly their previous administration, they were not interested in a Ben Simmons trade that would include Damian Lillard. They weren't interested in having that discussion. But we'll see now with Joe Cronin as interim GM and ownership now taking a look at how they want to move forward in Portland. Does that include Dame Lillard re-signed under a long contract next summer? Or do they start to look at him as potentially, a player who has maybe his maximum value in trade much sooner than later.
Yeah, and this is going to be something that we're going to be following and seeing how this plays out. Thank you so much, Woj.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.